Well, hello everybody out there. Ethan here, and I'm going to put out a video here today, and this is for a fellow by the name of Cash EDC. His channel is more dedicated more to the how to buy bulk ammo and how to stock up on ammo during the crunch of 2020, the ammo crunch of last year, and I'm going to assume probably this year too. But I commented on one of his videos that told him, I was like, well, I'm glad I kind of stocked up on some supplies before, some components before all this kicked off. And he asked, what do I need to do to get into reloading? Well, I'm going to say to everybody out there who's watching this, like I said to him, I would love to put that all down in one comment, but there is so much information out there on this subject. It is really mind-boggling how much there is on the subject. It's kind of overwhelming for some people right off the bat. But I'll tell you, if you do get into it, it's actually quite a bit of fun, and you learn a lot. But first off, okay, so the first question I've got to ask you is, why are you wanting to get into reloading? There are some pros, and there are some cons. And I'm going to go over the cons with you first. Number one being that reloading, everybody is convinced that reloading is something that you can do, and it saves you a lot of money, and it does save you some money to an extent, but everybody just thinks this is really easy, something that it really is kind of something anybody can do if they study on it enough. But it's kind of like building AKs, and you'll have to bear with the wind right now, because right now we got a front moving in and the wind is blowing like 40 miles an hour outside right now. It's kind of like building AKs. So when you build AKs, you can get all the tooling for it, and if you're going to do a lot of AKs, it'll pay for itself. But if you're only planning on building one, it might be fun, but you're going to lose a lot of money, and you're going to have a bunch of tools you won't know what to do with, and it's cheaper just to buy one if you're going to build it just for one. So it's kind of like that. The amount of tooling that goes into this process is pretty, there's a few things you're going to need, and it's going to cost some money. So that's one con, if you will, of doing this. Another one that people don't really care for is it is time consuming. It can be time consuming. And you will find yourself sitting there by the hour reloading, and a lot of people just can't stand that. They can't do that. I'm going to switch right over there to the pros, because for me this is a pro. Because to me it's relaxing. It's almost zen-like. You can sit there, you can listen to some slow bluegrass gospel music, or sometimes an audiobook. Maybe even sometimes I like to listen to like scary stories on the internet. And it's just, I've had a lot of good memories just sitting over here by myself reloading, and it's a lot of fun. For me, at least. A lot of people say, I hate reloading, I'd rather be out shooting. I almost would rather be reloading than shooting, because I know I'm not wasting money or burning money whenever I'm reloading. It's fun for me. Another pro that people do it for is accuracy. Now, I do some long range shooting with the AR-10, and the ammo you saw in that video, I hadn't moved my setup over here yet, and so I was just shooting M80 ball, and yeah, you could tell, but I guarantee you if I was using Sierra Match Kings, I would have hit that thing at least, I'd assume 2 rounds. That milk jug at about 2 rounds. So, accuracy is another one. There's a lot that you're going to learn a lot about what makes ammo tick and how much is actually going into it to make bullets accurate. You think, oh, primer gets hit, lights powder, powder goes off, pushes bullet down the barrel, and a story. There's a lot that goes into it, and you will learn a lot. And you will learn that there are things that cause accuracy to fail, to make a more inaccurate round. The main thing you got to watch for when making like target rounds or long-range precision rounds is consistency. Consistency, consistency, consistency. You've got to make sure everything is consistent, down to the 10th of a grain of powder, to how clean your shells are, to how many times you rotate your primer cleaning tool. Everything should be consistent. All of your cases should be the exact same length. All of your bullets should should be seated to the exact same depth. Everything, all your cases should be the same, all your bullets should be the same. Everything's got to be the same. But yes, you can make a much more accurate round by hand loading. Another pro that I'm going to go into is, yes, it is cost effective over the long run. If you do as much shooting as me and my brothers do, it pays for itself. We'll just put it that way. Once you get all of your setup bought and put up, you can start reloading like 38 Special. Well, maybe not so much now because of the primer incident, but you can start reloading 38 Special for like 2 or 3 cents a round. It's insane. Another pro, there's a lot of pros to this. Another pro is that, I don't know if you've kind of seen our studio, but there are a lot of firearms in here, and a lot of them are in very obscure cartridges. 8mm Nambu, 43 Spanish, like that rolling block right there. 7.7mm Japanese ammo. Gonna have a Lebel one of these days, or here before too long. 8mm Lebel, 30 caliber Mauser. Those are pretty obscure rounds, and it's kind of hard to find ammo for them. But if you can get all the reloading supplies for them, then you got something. Then you can kind of shoot them all the time. That's why my Webley, that Webley video, I look back at it, and that thing was interesting. I made a lot of pretty bad errors in that video about historical accuracies and whatnot, but I mean, I shot over 100 rounds while making that video of essentially 45 auto. Not quite, that would not chamber in a 45 auto because the bullet was actually 455 instead of 452. But to get that much ammo, first of all, you can't buy ammo like that on the market, and second of all, to get that much ammo, 45 auto in 2020, that would have been a little tough. So yeah, you can put it in obscure guns. Now you can actually chamber 45 auto in that Webley. I would not do it because 455 Webley has a chamber pressure, like a max chamber pressure of, I think it's 15,000 psi. 45 auto has a max chamber pressure of about 27,000 psi. Yeah, it's probably not a good idea to put 45 auto in your Webley. But anyhow, so yeah, there's so many advantages like that. And then there's one more I'd like to mention here, and that is whenever things like pandemics, elections, all that stuff comes up, and all the ammo disappears off the shelf, guess who's got kind of a heads up? When you walk into Cabela's one day and all of the ammo's gone, there is no heads up for that. However, if you're a reloader and you walk in and all the ammo's gone, which you don't generally buy anyways, you can sit there and go, okay, it's probably time to go stock up on reloading components. And you usually get a little more of a heads up in that situation. So, enough of me yammering on about pros and cons. Let's start talking about what you're going to need to get started. Now, before I tell you to get anything, before you start to load your first bullet, you need to have a good load data book. This one was a gift from my late uncle to me. It's a Hornady data book, and it's got all sorts of hand loads in it. And as a matter of fact, he loved the M1 Garand so much in there. The pages all wrinkled up and it's turned over. He's marked it, but he loved it so much he actually marked the page where the M1 Garand was, so we could just sit there and be like, hey, let's look M1 Garand 30-06 versus 8mm Mauser. And you can do that with that book. It's kind of fun. But you need some good load data. You also need to do your research. Watch YouTube videos from good quality content creators. I would suggest going to guys like Fortune Cookie 45 LC. He's a really good ammo reloading channel. He puts out some really good stuff. A lot of stuff I've learned from watching his channel. So yeah, do your research, do your studying, and once you're comfortable with that, then you can probably move on. Now the next thing you're going to need, obviously, is you're going to need a press. Now there are several different kinds of presses, and usually everybody only talks about two: single stage and progressive, which I'm going to try to make this as simple as I can. So the way a single stage press works is I would have like all my ammo out right here, and I would get a die not too far off from, say, let's see here, all right, I'd have a die, and it would kind of be like this, but it just sits in there like that. There's one spot for one die, one spot for one cartridge. What you do is you go through every single station of the reloading process, one process at a time. That's all you can do. It's single stage, one stage at a time. So you've got to take all of your ammo. Like I'd have to take all this, and I would have to deprime, and I would have to size them all one at a time. And then whenever I'm done, I'd have to unscrew this die and then measure this one up and set it in there. Actually, no, not that one. That's the crimp. Yep, I'd have to take this one and I'd have to measure everything up, get everything just the way I want it, and then set this one in there, and then I'd have to pour all my individual powder charges, seat all my bullets. It's just one stage at a time, and it is very time consuming. It is a bit cheaper, I will give it that, but in my opinion, it's not worth it. So, but it is good for beginners, I guess. But if you're going to get a single stage and you're planning on doing this long term, I would suggest that you go ahead and pull the trigger and get something better. So then the second one I'm going to mention is one I do not have any experience with, but I've seen lots of videos on it, which is the progressive, which essentially has all of your dies mounted up in the top, and you have a little wheel on the bottom that rotates and pushes your cartridges through, and you can run every cartridge through with just by essentially pulling the lever, and it runs the cartridges through. All you got to do is, they have automatic primers on them, and all you got to do is put your cartridge in, run a lever, put a bullet on, you know, and just every cartridge and bullet. That's all it takes. It's pretty quick, but it's more expensive. What I've got here is something that is a happy medium between those two. What this is this is the Lee Classic Turret Press. And I've got to say, I'm very impressed with this thing. I've had it for several years now, and I am loving it. It is a very good press. I love Lee. I love working with Lee Precision on everything because they really are. They got some very good customer service, and they make really good products too. But essentially how this one works is you have one station for the, so it's kind of like a mixture of both, of the single stage and the progressive, because like the single stage, you only have one spot to put a bullet. But like the progressive, you have all your dies on top. You might be saying, how does this work? This one works by every time you pull the lever and you come down, it automatically turns your dies for you. And so now all you got to do, go another round. Actually, you can start off here. That's the deprimer. Deprime, put a primer in. I've got this fancy little priming tool here from Lee. Put a primer in, go down. That will prime it. You'll go up. That will expand the case mouth and put the powder charge in it, because I have an automatic powder charge for my pistol calibers, not rifle calibers yet. Go down, put a bullet on top of the case, come up, go down, come up, crimps the bullet. You seated the bullet at the last station, the bullet is crimped, the bullet is complete, and you kind of put it right there. You pull your bullet off, you're done. I really like this design. I really do, because not only, you saw how simple it is, not only that, but it's a lot cheaper, and instead of having to pull my dies out every single time I want to shoot a different caliber, all I have to do is give this a little twist, pull it out. I'm going to set that down very gently because it's got powder still in the powder measure. I got my these are some 308 dies. And all you gotta do is line it up with the corresponding grooves. Let it fall through. And we're ready to reload 308. Pretty simple. I really love this design. I actually think I'd like it better than a progressive. Now, I could see where it could have some downfalls, especially in like the dies maybe not getting lined up 100% perfect, but I've never had any trouble with it, and I've actually reloaded some pretty accurate 308 out of this bad boy. So, and then to put it back in, you kind of got to line that up in there. So yeah, Lee Classic turret press, I would strongly suggest that. I really love it. Not all this stuff comes with it. The powder measure doesn't, that doesn't, but when you buy it, you just get the press, essentially. Oh, another thing, when you deprime it, another cool thing is there's this tube down here, automatically catches your spent primers, so whenever that gets full, you just go and take it and dump it in the brush. Let's see if I can do this without smashing my other hand. Alright, now this thing's gotten a little dirty and a little rusty because it's been sitting in my old garage, and yeah, it's a little nasty, but it's still working really good. Okay, so that's your press. Now, have you decided which one you're going to get yet? All my reloading will be done on the Lee Classic turret. So now, we're moving on. You got your press. Now, you're going to need a set of dies. Again, strongly suggest Lee Precision dies. And they come in a little box, like, I don't know if you can see them over there in the corner, but that's what they come in. And they cost like $20, $30 depending on the caliber. Some of the more obscure calibers are like in the several $100 or so. There's several different varieties of these dies. Like these ones right here, all my pistol caliber dies are carbide. These rifle dies, these 30-06 dies, are not. What that means is, that means there's going to be one extra step for these dies. And that's going to be, I'm going to have to lube all of my cases. Now, what I have to do this, I actually have a lube pad here, but I haven't used it in a bit. What I actually do is, Lee makes a lube, but I have to drive 2 hours to get it or order it online. So what I do is I use petroleum jelly. It actually works quite well. It's really cheap too. If you have carbide dies, you don't have to worry about it at all. So that's your lube. We've covered all this stuff. Let's see here, what else you gonna need? Oh yeah, scales. Got my Hornady electric scales here. And when you get your scales, that little pan they show in the picture, that thing is not worth much at all. Because it has you have to have a funnel for every single cartridge. What I have here, man, I love this thing so much. It's the best, like $7.50 I ever spent in my life. This thing right here, it's a Lyman. What you do with it is you pour your powder charge in it, you set it on your scales, zero your scales, pour your powder charge, measure it, and then you'll go and take it off there, put your case mouth in that funnel there, and you will essentially just pour it in. There's no mess. I think that's about it for the, oh, one more thing. You're gonna need calipers. You're going to be doing lots of measuring. Not so much with this as you would with a single stage, but you will still be doing a lot of measuring. And it's good to have a good set of calipers. They're a must. You have to have them. Have to have them. Let's see here. Am I missing anything else for the press? Nope, I think that's it. All right, let's move on to something that I should have mentioned before, which we're going to go to right here, and that is brass prep. Now, you probably need all your press and all that stuff beforehand because you can actually reload dirty brass. I don't suggest it. You're going to lose out on accuracy. But you can do it with smokeless powder. So this right here is a brass trimmer. And you're going to need a good brass trimmer. Just going to tell you, you do not want to be shooting untrimmed brass. We will get into that in our brass prep part of this video. But you will need to be able to trim your brass. Another thing you will need eventually, if you want to do this long term, is you're going to need yourself some sort of brass cleaning device. You know, I've got this Lyman Turbo brass tumbler here. It's the Pumpkin, as it is affectionately known. And you're also going to need some sort of tumbling media. Now, the internet is good for giving you bad advice, and this was one occasion where I listened to it and I wish I hadn't. Like I said, it's 2 hours away for me to get to the nearest Cabela's, or to the nearest place I can buy reloading supplies at the time. And I didn't want to do that. And so I was like, what is a good alternative for brass cleaning media? People were like, well, use rice. So I did that. I went and I bought me a bunch of brown rice, and I ran it through there, and didn't turn out so well. The rice was getting caught in the flash holes, and you couldn't get it out, and then it was just a mess. It wasn't even cleaning the brass that good. So then I moved on to my second one that I saw, which was kitty litter. And that one was even worse, because not only did it not clean the brass, it put this thin, like, film on the brass. It was like some sort of, I don't know, it was like a soft mud. And then it filled up every single flash hole. It was filling up cases, so I would go to reload, and I would, like, tap it out, and I would have half the case fall out full of kitty litter dust, essentially. And that was a terrible idea. So if you're going to do this, and don't use sand either, that'll actually tear up your brass. Get you some tumbling media. It's like 10, 11 bucks. And this stuff will last a long time. So get you some tumbling media. It comes in corn cob. I like using walnut shell myself. But this is corn cob. It's the new thing I'm going to try here. But yeah, get you some good media. Let's see, what else do we need for brass prep? I don't have it with me yet. I need to grab it. I have a primer pocket cleaner. That's another thing that's pretty nice to have, especially if you're doing precision long-range shooting. However, we're loading for the 1917 infield, so it's just kind of, you know, it's more target loads than anything. And by target, I mean going out and shooting pop cans. So, yeah, that is what you are going to need for brass prep. Now let's talk about components. What you're going to need for components is, first off, you're going to need cases. That's pretty straightforward. You shoot them as long as they haven't been shot like 8 times. You know, you get some good cases. If it's pistol cases, you can go a long ways on pistol cases, but find them at the range. You find them laying on the ground some places. As long as they're not all dented and damaged up, you should be good to go. So yeah, you're going to need cases. Next thing you're going to need, which is a little harder to find, are primers. Now, there's a shortage of these right now, and I'll tell you why, and it's because Federal, CCI, all the companies that were the big primer producers are all now worried more about supplying 9mm manufacturers instead of trying to supply reloaders. And so that is why there's actually a primer shortage right now, because it's not even getting to the stores. It's all going to the manufacturers of 9mm and 5.56. So that's why small pistol primers and small rifle primers are very hard to come by right now. The large rifle primers I can still find. They're expensive. They're like $70 for 1,000. But yeah. So primers. That's another thing you're going to need. Next, you're going to need powder. For 30-06 and for almost all my rifle loads, I use 4895. It's a very versatile powder. It works good in 30-06, 308, 4570, 270, 303. It just works in a lot of different calibers. So get yourself the appropriate powder for what you're planning to do, especially for the bullet you're going to be using. I'm going to be loading these 30-06s with some Sierra. I love Sierra bullets. These are the 150 grain Pro Hunter. They were the only 150 grain bullets that I could find at Cabela's whenever I was buying these, and so I went ahead and I got them specifically for the surplus rifles, the M1 Garand at the 1917s, the 1903, things like that. So yeah, that's all you guys need for brass prep. Components and your setup here. Oh, and another thing, if you get this Lee Classic turret die, these are $10 at Cabela's. Get a bunch of them. I need to go get more because I got more dies now than I do of turrets, but get yourself a bunch of turrets. Do yourself a favor because it is so nice just to be able to change turrets out on this thing. But yeah, that's all you're going to need to get started. Still with me? Let's get ready to do some brass prep. So let's get started in the brass prep part of this video. So first things first, if you have a Lee Classic turret press like I do, and yes, my dies are very rusty. They were in my garage and it lets moisture in, and yeah, is a bad deal, but they'll still work. First thing you're going to want to do is take off your priming tool if you have it. And it just kind of rocks out like that. Put that aside. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to take out this turret. Just give it a little twist, pull up, and out she comes. Now we're going to have to deprime these before we can do anything with them. So let's go ahead and put another turret in. Normally, you would have a turret to just drop in. But I don't have that right now, so I'm going to also show you how to measure these up once I get this thing lined up here. In just a second. Alright, so let's get ready to go ahead and resize and deprime these cases. Or this case. I'm just going to do one for this video just to kind of show you. So let's go. First thing you're going to want to do is we're going to pop out this collar right here. You want your lever at the halfway position and just pop that out. It comes out like that. Just slips out. I'm going to get my special handy dandy Operation Iraqi Freedom tin out. That's where I keep all these. Niggle around. Yeah, there's 30-06. Slide that bad boy in there. Right. So now we got that in there. Let's go ahead and put in our deprimer. Now the way you find out which one this is pretty simple. It has this kind of firing pin looking protrusion coming out of it. And the way you do these is, the book says when you tighten down your dies, and I need to clean this one up, man, it's got a lot of sizing lube. That's what I didn't quite like about the old sizing lube, was the fact it's kind of messy. This one should already be set, the lock nut's already there, but the book says when you put those in to get the measurement right for the first time, it should be you drop your lever all the way down, tighten it down until it makes contact with this, the ram is what that's called, and then give it another quarter turn. I've already done that, so this one should be ready to go. We are ready to deprime our cases. So let's go ahead and do that. First things first, get our case. This is the one that will be shown in this video. I will shoot it at the end. It's a good little 30-06 case, little Winchester. What we're going to do is we're going to put on some of my makeshift bullet lube, petroleum jelly. I just put a little on my finger, kind of smear a little around on there. It doesn't take too much. I got a little much on there than what I was wanting, but it'll work. It helps if you have a rag here, kind of wipe your hand off. I also have a lube pad there. Guess I could have used that. Alright, so everything is in place. We are ready to go ahead and deprime this cartridge, and I will show you how that looks. Alright, so we got our case slipped into the little collet right there. You can see the rim sits on there, and you just slide her on in. So now it's sitting in there. We're all lined up, ready to go. Let's go ahead and size and deprime. Now as I'm going up, I'm pushing this ram up into this die. You'll start to feel some resistance. That's perfectly fine. That means you are now hitting into where it's starting to resize. Keep pushing through. You should just take a little pressure and you should hear that. And that primer is now down in that tube down there. We'll go ahead and pull our lever back up. You see the cartridge starts to come out of the die. Sometimes it takes a little bit of pressure. That one kind of stuck. That's mostly because our die is dry. But yeah, there is one deprimed and sized 30-06. You know it's been deprimed because there's no primer in there anymore, and it's been sized. So now we are ready to move on to brass trimming. Alright, and now we're ready to trim our little piece of brass. So first thing, you're going to need your little socket, or collet. I think it's called a collet. And that just slides right into this brass trimmer. This is an old Pacific, and there's like no instructions to it or anything. And it's really kind of, yeah, there's not a whole lot of information on it. It's really a really old brass trimmer. But I think I've got it pretty much figured out. So what I do is I get that set in there, and I'll look in my book for the case, the overall case length Not a maximum overall case length, but just this general case length. It says right here, ideally for the M1 Garand, which it's kind of what I'm looking for, the case trim length should be 2484. Let's get our calipers and take a look. Adjusted for 2.840 inches. And if you don't know how to use a caliper, I'm probably not going to go too much into that on this video, but it's pretty self-explanatory. But let's see if this case fits in that length. It actually does. So we know this case is actually still in pretty good shape. However, I'm just going to kind of put it in the brass trimmer just to show you how this works, and I'm not going to really trim on it. So the way the brass trimmer works, or at least this one, is you'll go ahead and you will find, let's see here. You'll go ahead and you will mount your cartridge in there. With this little lever back here, this little knob back here loosened up. Once you got your cartridge mounted in, you tighten it up. Now, essentially what you would do is you would take this, set it where you want it for your case length. In this case, we want 2.840. So what we would do is go in here, and I don't know the proper way to do this, I guess I should say, but push that all the way in like that until it stops on the washer, and just kind of gently set that. Give it some trimming. I'm not going to do it obviously because yeah, I don't want to shorten this brass too short, but you would just kind of trim it along like that until you find one, until you get to where you are stopped. You can't push it any further, and the bullet or the casing has a case overall length of 2.84. So that's kind of how that works. Some people like to ask, is it necessary that I trim my brass? And I say to them, absolutely. And I'll tell you why. Alright, so what we got going on here, this is why it's important you trim your brass. Don't mind the terrible artistry here, but this is me trying to show you what this looks like whenever you don't trim your brass, with the problems you can run into. So now imagine here, these two black spots here are your chamber walls, and this is a cartridge that is almost gone into battery but hasn't quite yet. Now if you'll notice here, there are two spots in the chamber that are actually cut out before the obviously your bullet would be the same diameter as your barrel diameter, but there are two spots in which your case mouth will run into, because your case mouth is proud about maybe 3 or 4 thousandths of an inch on all sides of the bullet, around the bullet. And what can happen is if your case length is too long, it will, when you push it into battery, you'll feel pressure. Sometimes it won't chamber at all. But what it can do is whenever it goes in, your case mouth can get crimped right here and get crimped down on top of the bullet, which we'll say that's the bullet there. This causes pressure on either side of the bullet, here, just all around it, all around the bullet, and you've added a crimp that's not going to come apart very easily. And this can cause pressure spikes when your powder goes off, because now it has to push out that bullet that is being crimped in by the barrel itself. So this is why you have to trim your brass with bottleneck cartridges. Now it's time for this to go into the pumpkin. I'll grab my casing right quick. Drop it out of there. And in there she goes. Alright, so we're back. Had a little bit of an interesting day. Had the whole Capitol Hill brake change just a second ago, so it's actually been 3 or 4 hours. That's 3 hours. Usually want to do this for, you can do it overnight or whatever, but let's just see how good our piece of brass is cleaned. So to get your brass out of this, you're going to want to kind of leave it running. Get yourself a tub like this one right here. And you'll just take your brass cleaner. One hand, simply take it, let it drain, like that for a while, and it'll get loud. There's our freshly cleaned brass case. It cleaned this corncob media. It actually worked really, really good. I was really impressed with that stuff. Cool. Let's go to the next step. Alright, and now here's where we get to a subject that I was going to do, but this takes actually 2 hands, and that is cleaning out your primer pockets. Essentially what you do is you take a tool. If it's a large primer pocket, get a large one. If it's a small, get a small one. That's pretty simple. But what you do is this thing, I don't know if you can see it here, the end of this little screwdriver kind of thing has got essentially a set of blades, and they just go and they take and they clean out that primer pocket in there. Okay? And you can see it's still got some carbon and stuff in there, and that'll actually cause accuracy issues for long-range precision rounds. But these are just mainly for use at the range, and I'll probably only be shooting these probably, I don't know, 300 meters max, so yeah, don't really have to worry about that. The reason I clean this is because if you feed these in semi-auto rifles, especially, clean brass feeds better. It also looks nicer. That's not really a necessary step if you're really having to go cheap, but it's something I really like to do. But yeah, that's brass prep for you. So we made it this far. If you're still with me, we're finally getting ready to load this cartridge. So first things first, this is mainly going to be for the Lee Classic turret press. And the stages, what you see here, the way I run this, the stages actually are the same for pretty much every press, to the way I set up my dies, to everything. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to want to do here is we're actually going to set up our dies, because normally, if this is how I had this disc set up to begin with, all I'd have to do is, like I said, halfway down, or halfway up, all I'd have to do is just take this and essentially give it a little twist and pull it off and slap a new one in there. However, I'm out of these discs, so I'm going to have to switch out my 308 dies for 30-06. So let's see here. That's all good. Do a functions check. Yes, we are flowing around. Good. Alright, so let's go ahead and set our dies. So with the Lee Classic turret press, you actually have to set your dies in a certain order. So, well, I mean, with any press, but namely for this one, because as you see, whenever it rotates counterclockwise, bringing me to the next station, and all the way until I get back to the first station. So my first station is already set. I showed you how to do that. Let's go ahead and set up the second station, which is actually going to be this here bullet seating station right here. Now normally it's different on some of them. Like on my pistol ones, my second station would be my case mouth opener and my powder charge dumper station. But this is the station we got here. Now what's very important is bullet depth. We got to have the right bullet depth, and I can't remember, well I do remember, the last thing I loaded with these were some cast 220 grain bullets, and they were extremely long. So this is set up for a long bullet. So I have not loaded with these 150s yet. I'm going to have to reset how far my bullet depth is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to screw this down to where it was. Get it nice and snug, not too tight, but snug. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this knob up here and I'm going to loosen it up a lot. And I'll show you why in a minute, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. About the time you see threads, that's usually good enough. Alright, let's set up our third station and our last station for not having a powder measure for our rifle rounds, which is going to be the crimp. Okay? So this one's kind of like the bullet seating one. The way you adjust it is by your first round. So let me show you how that works. Let's go ahead and we'll get it tightened down here. And I'm going to leave about a little bit of space. You can see there's a little bit of space between that nut and the disc there. I'm going to go ahead and leave that space for now just for adjustment purposes. Alright, now we've got our press set up. Let's get the rest of our table set up for the powder measuring. Alright, and this is how your reloading bench should kind of look like before you go to reload rifle rounds, especially whenever you're having to measure out every individual load. Just from right to left, I'm just kind of going with the things that I'm going to need most to my right, which is I'm going to need case lube, which for me, petroleum jelly. Next thing you're going to be using a lot is going to be, I like to have them pretty close, is your scales. And with my electronic scales, they're very sensitive to getting beat around and stuff and vibration, so I like to set them on top of the box just to kind of cushion them a little bit from the bench moving around and whatnot. And I got my powder out. You're going to definitely want to make sure there's no open source of flame or sparks with anywhere near your reloading bench, because you got powder out, and if this place went up, it would really go up with a boom. There's a lot of powder in here. And then actually I've got my bullets laying out there, my 150 grain Sierra Match Kings in front of the powder. I've got my cases out next to that, and then I've also got out my calipers. And we're going to need those quite a bit for this process. I'm just kind of trying to give you a little bit of an idea what your bench should look like before you actually start loading. Now we got one more thing to do, and that's to get ready to prime this case. Let me show you, there's a couple of ways you can do it. So the last step you're going to do before you start loading is getting ready to prime your cartridge. There's two ways you can do this. You can either put the primers in one at a time, and I'll show you how I do that, or I think it's like $30, you can buy this. This is a Lee, I can't remember what it's called exactly. It's an assistant. It's a thing that makes it easier to prime, essentially. And I use one of these that works pretty good. Sometimes I'll have a primer fall out of it or whatever, but it actually makes it where I'm not having to grab every individual primer and put it in there. And so that's kind of handy. And I'll just show you how you load this. So first off, you're going to know how many cartridges you're going to be loading. I know for the purpose of this video, I'm only loading one 30-06. So I will take one large rifle primer, and note that I'm not using a large pistol primer or a Magnum pistol primer, and that is mostly because pistol primers are usually made of a softer metal, hence they will actually go off easier. And in some semi-auto rifles like the M14, the M1 Garand, the firing pin, even the AR-15, the firing pin will actually strike the primer slightly. And so that actually can cause an out-of-battery explosion. So first thing we're going to want to do is you'll want to empty out all old primers, put them in corresponding containers marked for what kind of primer they are. I don't have any in here right now, so we're going to go ahead and get our one primer. Here it is. And we will open up our priming tool. We do this by taking and flipping this switch down here all the way to open. That opens this up. Now, another thing I need to mention is they send you two of these when you buy them. There's one for large and one for small. And that's pretty self-explanatory. So large will do large rifle and large pistol, Magnum rifle and Magnum pistol. Small does small pistol, small rifle, small Magnum pistol. You know, you get the drift. So another thing that's kind of cool about this is I'm going to drop this. You want to make sure that all of your cups, anvil and everything, the pellet, are all facing, let me see here. I think they all have to be facing up. No, they all have to be facing, yeah, up. So you'll notice I can actually take this and put it in upside down. See, like that right there. And if I shake it enough, the way those little ridges are in there, it'll actually flip itself around. And you can do that whenever you dump 100 of those in there, flip it around, and it'll usually flip almost all of them over. Next thing we'll do is just close that up. You can set it on lock, which is what you don't want. You want it to be on. It is went down, and it is ready to be put into a case now. Alright, now that we've got all of this stuff ready to go, we are ready to load our first cartridge. Let me show you how we're going to do that. First, I'm going to hook my priming tool back in. I'm going to grab my empty casing that we've been working with here. I'll put a little lube on it because that lube got kind of buffed out in the tumbler. Alright, so now my case is lubed. I'm going to go ahead and put this number 2 shell holder back in. Get a little more lube on this case. A little more petroleum jelly. And we just slip that in to the shell holder and we are ready to go. Alright, now we're ready to go to the first station. This is the depriming, which we've already done, and the sizing. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run it back up in there. And I'm going to get it all the way up in there. That. And then I just simply kind of line that up to that, and I give it a little push. And it drops a primer into my priming cup. Now, I might mention that our press here is bolted onto this table, but it's actually a little bit loose. I'm going to be tightening in that later, but you might see the press move a little bit. So next thing, we're going to go ahead and we're going to prime this cartridge. Alright, and here we can actually see the primer in the priming cup. And this is for that priming cup is for a large primer. Now watch what happens. As I lower the ram, raising the lever, it pushes that priming cup into the case, and we're going to go ahead and give it a little push. Alright, that should be seated. Let's go ahead and go up. No priming case. And we have a primed cartridge. Now when you do this, you're going to want to make sure that the primer is flush, if not a little below, the case. You don't want it sticking out and being proud. If it's proud, you could run into potential out-of-battery explosions. Alright, now that our case has been primed, sized, still lubed, we will now be measuring out a powder charge. First thing you're going to want to make sure you do is put your funnel or your pan, whatever, on the scale itself. The best way I figured out how to do this is just set it on there and then turn on your scale. You got to hold that down. And it will automatically, let's see if I can show you here, zero out. Okay, so now we need to pour our powder charge. Now, the Hornady book I've got actually says that you want to go with about 46.4 grains of IMR 4895 for a 150 grain Spitzer bullet. So let's go ahead and measure out that amount. And there we have 46.4 grains of IMR 4895. So now, let's go ahead and load this charge of powder. Alright, to prime my cartridge, I'm actually going to set it in the box here, like that, so it's holding it, especially considering I only have one hand. I will take my funnel and set it over the cartridge, and that dropped every single grain of powder into that case without spilling any of it. So now we have a primed, charged, sized 30-06 cartridge. Let's go ahead and keep going. Alright, so we are back in the shell holder. Now it is time to see a bullet. These are 150 grain Spitzer Sierra Game King soft points. And to do this, we're simply going to want to set our bullet in our casing and get it started. You're going to want to make sure it's kind of straight. And push it up in there. Now, here's why I told you we're going to leave that knob a little bit loose. Because we've got to see our depth. So I did not feel any resistance, which means it did not even come into contact. The top of the die did not even come into contact with a bullet. Still nothing. Still nothing. And the way you do this is just give it a couple of turns. Okay, there I felt something. Alright, yeah, our bullet's still sitting on there straight. It kind of funnels it up in there, so you should be good as far as keeping your bullet straight. Let's go ahead and seat it a little bit. I felt it give a little. Let's go ahead and give it a little more. A little more. Now the rule of thumb is you want your bullet to be at least the diameter of the bullet, which in this case is 308 or 0.308 of an inch into the case. Alright, so I think we should have our bullet depth just right. Let's take a look at what we got. That looks pretty good. Now we go to the last step, which is crimping. Now, adjusting your crimp is just about like adjusting your bullet depth. In that, I just now realized I didn't show you guys what I was adjusting. It's this knob up here. You just turn it clockwise to make the bullet go deeper. And if you're too deep, turn it counterclockwise, and obviously it's not going to pull the bullet out, but it will make your next round not that deep. Pretty much the same setup for the crimp. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring the bullet up into the crimping die. And you can see it's coming up there. Alright. And I'm going to screw it down until I can feel it make contact. And right there I feel contact. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down a little bit more. I'm trying to tighten that nut down. Yeah, there we go. And I'm going to release. I'm going to go down. And I think that nut right there is probably going to make a pretty decent crimp if I go down to where that is. So here we go. Going up. Give it a good push. That felt just perfect. That is one finished 30-06. I know it feels like it has been a long journey, but there we go. We have made a cartridge. Alright, so we have our finished 30-06. Isn't that thing beautiful? We got it ready to test out. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and just give it a chambering and see how well it chambers. If you feel any resistance, that means you didn't trim your brass right. But let's go ahead and give her the old college try here. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put it in the magazine. Goes in the magazine. I'm going to run the bolt forward. I'm going to do this gently because, like I said, you know, soft primers and whatnot, even though this is a bolt action. And now we got to lock down. It's going to be hard to do one-handed, but that locked down pretty nice. Really nice, actually. I almost feel like I felt a little resistance there towards the end. Like right there. But I think that may actually just be how the rifle is. Let's go ahead and extract this. Examine the case mouth for any signs of a secondary crimp. I don't see any. Maybe that's just me trying to do this one-handed. Let me go ahead and try again. So we go in. That's about how it felt going in the battery. Yeah, that's just kind of the way the rifle is. Whenever I'm doing it with my weak hand, one-handed, there's a little bit of pressure there towards the end, and I think that's just engaging the locking lugs. So yeah, we have a 30-06 bullet all put together and ready to roll. What do you guys say we fire it? Now we have our 30-06 cartridge we loaded here. So let's go ahead and see how well she works. All right, we're chambered up. It worked. Well guys, that's about all I got for this video right here. If you like what you've seen and it's helped you learn something, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, thank you for watching.